we want to talk about the Negro experiment. Recently, this past Sunday, Dr. Wesley Muhammad did a powerful lecture uh, at the Nation of Islam's headquarter, Mosque Mariam, where he exposes, exposed a lot about what's going on, what's behind the vaccine, why are Black people being pushed forward when all during the Black Lives Matter March protests, we were being pushed back. So first, can you tell us a little bit about, if you can give us a beginning? I wanted to start off with this Dr. Sims, this Dr. Sims who had a statue. His statue was in New York, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it says there was a bronze statue of Dr. named James Marion Sims. He is known as the father of modern gynecology, but achieved this title from barbaric experimental surgeries on enslaved Black women. And when I studied about what this doctor did and how he did his surgery and how he needed men to hold down these women, can you talk a little bit about this barbarism from this Dr. Sims? And if you want, even the statue that was erected for this man.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think the first thing that we have to acknowledge is that racism is systemic, meaning that racism was not just seen in colonization and slavery and the Jim Crow era and, blatant racism that we may encounter every day, but it was embedded in systems. And so it was embedded in the perceptions of those creating the sciences and executing the sciences. And so for Dr. Sims, first of all, we have to understand that his medical training was extremely limited at that time. 3 months of training was his extent of medical school. And he, in fact, had 2 dead patients before he went on to Alabama to start the things that he's most known for. But what he was known for was this experimentation on enslaved women. And not just enslaved women, but oftentimes people don't speak about the children that he also operated on. Everything from the gynecological studies and creating a way to look inside the woman's body and using tools, and then eventually creating the speculum that's used now, doing surgical procedures without anesthesia, without consent, hysterectomies, removing body parts, right? Removing organs. Things that we actually are seeing even today at our border with the individuals who are in cages, right? No consent, hysterectomies, removal of organs, right? All of these things were happening, and he was harming women in the process. And he was not considerate of them being human because they were not looked at as human. At this time, Black people were looked at as property. And so doing something to a Black person was simply using them as a guinea pig. Even doing things to dead bodies, to Black bodies that had already been passed on, grave robbing and using cadavers and doing autopsies and all kinds of things that they were doing just to Black people.
Right.
And
he was not an outlier either. And
no,
when you say anesthesia, and not to interrupt, but when you say anesthesia, that he wasn't using anesthesia, it wasn't that he did not have anesthesia. He just didn't use anesthesia.
Correct. And there was a time where, of course, during some of his study, anesthesia may not have been available. But when the women were complaining of the pain, what his idea was one that was very common and is still common to this day in the medical field, which is that Black people do not feel pain in the same way that white people do, and that our skin is thicker, which is not at all true in any way, shape, or form. But yet this is the ideology that went behind a lot of the thought processes of why it's okay to continue, even though this person is clearly agonizing in pain. Even to the extent of his views of intelligence. He believed that Black people had inferior intelligence, as was a very common belief that was perpetuated through the sciences, through psychology, through psychiatry, through some of the different studies that were produced that suggested that we were inferior. And for him, because he believed that we were inferior, he believed that we were less intelligent because he
Hmm.
believed that the skulls of Black people grew too quickly around the brain. And so he would operate on children where he would use a shoemaker's tool to physically loosen the skulls of children. That was his perception of helping the Black community.
Right.
And
And
so
once,
for him, he was the father of gynecology. He was, someone who was looked at and praised for his work, and that's why the statue was erected as, a celebration of this individual who's done all this amazing work. Without his work, we wouldn't have the things that we have today. But we don't talk about how he got there, and that's why
right.
there was a huge conversation about removing that statue or replacing it with information that tells the truth, and that whole dichotomy of what do we do with these racist individuals who have been glorified in this country.
And once again, we want to emphasize that the only reason why we're talking about him, because he's once again not an outlier. He was one among many. The only reason why we're talking about him is because he did, and the woman, her name, I believe, was where's her name at? Here's her name. Her name was Anarcha. Anarcha. A Black woman named Anarcha uh, endured 30 procedures without anesthesia. His statue should be taken down, and her statue should be erected. And the number of other women that he operated on, their statues should be erected.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Let's have a discussion. People have questions. They would like answers. Let's talk about the issues. Confront the things that may be difficult to address. The Black narrative.